Hey everyone, last time we talked about triads, and this time we're going to talk about triad inversions and seventh chords. So we can rearrange the order of the pitches in a triad through a process that we call inversion. And to designate inversions, we use a system called figured bass. Figured bass uses numbers to designate the intervals above the lowest notated pitch of each chord. When writing figured bass, we do not need to designate major or minor intervals. So here is our C major triad. So above the root, we have a fifth and a third. So the figured bass symbol for that is 5-3. So we would call it C 5-3. Or, if we were to use Roman numerals, because we're clearly in the key of C because of our key signature, we could call it 1-5-3, because C is our one chord in the key of C. So if we take this C down here, move it up an octave, all of a sudden we have inverted the C major chord. So the intervals that we now have, from E to C is a sixth, and from E to G is a third. So that figure is 6-3 instead of 5-3. That's typically abbreviated to just 6. So this is a C6 or a 1-6 chord. Now, if we take that E and take that up an octave, we've inverted the chord yet again in second inversion. So now, the interval from G up to E is a sixth, and then G up to C is a fourth. So if you're a little rusty on your intervals, if we start on G and just count up, G is 1, A is 2, B is 3, C is 4, D is 5, E is 6. So since that interval is a sixth, and that interval is a fourth, call the figure for second inversion 6-4. So let's listen to those two different inversions as long as the root position the C major chord. There you have it. Now let's talk about seventh chords. Seventh chords contain 4 pitches. They contain a triad plus an added seventh above the root. So we're going to take that same C major triad we had a minute ago and add a major seventh above it. So this is a C major triad plus a major seventh. So we call this a C major major 7, but more often than not, we're just going to abbreviate it to C major 7. So here's what that chord sounds like. Beautiful chord. Now with the next one, this is the one that we call a C dominant 7. So a lot of times when you see it written in a chord chart, you'll just see it C7. So it's a C major triad with an added minor 7th on the top. And again, if you're a little rusty on intervals, since C to B is a major 7th, if we flat a major interval, it becomes a minor interval. So from C to B flat is a minor 7th. So if it were here, it would be C major 7. If it's here, it's C minor 7. So let's listen to, C dominant 7th, but this interval on the top is a minor 7th. So let's listen to that chord. So that's a C dominant 7th chord. Let's compare the difference between C major 7 and C dominant 7. So here's C major 7, here's C dominant. And now, let's talk about another type of 7th chord. This one, you're typically not going to see it in 18th and 19th century classical literature, but you will see it a pretty fair amount in jazz. So it's a C augmented 7th chord, where it's a C augmented triad, which means instead of C, E, G, take G, the fifth, and sharpen, or we raise it by a half step. So we have a C augmented triad with an added minor seventh above the root. It's going to give you this chord, C augmented 7. Really cool sounding chord. Like I said, it's a pretty jazzy sounding chord. You're not going to hear it a whole lot in Mozart, but it's good to know because you will see it in jazz charts. So let's compare those three. So here's C major 7, C minor 7, sorry, my bad, C dominant 7, then C augmented 7. Now that one that you just stopped on was a C minor 7. So notice, if you want to take a major triad, C, E, G, and make it minor, you just flat the third. So we now have a C minor triad with an added minor 7th above the root. So we have C minor 7, often just written as C minor 7. So let's hear that chord again. Now, the next two are built off of a diminished triad. So if we take a minor triad and turn it into a diminished triad, all we do is flat the fifth. So we have C, E flat, G flat, and B flat. So it's a diminished triad with an added minor 7th above the root. So here's what the chord sounds like. I love the sound of those chords. So it's a C diminished triad with a minor 7th, and we call it half diminished 7 in classical literature. So that little degree symbol with the slash through it, that's the symbol that you'll typically see when you see this in a classical score. Now, in jazz, it's often written as C minor 7 in parentheses, flat 5. Because if I just take this 5th scale degree and make it a C minor 7 chord, it sounds great. If I take that tone and flat it, that's C minor 7, flat 5. It's two different ways of thinking of the same chord. So now, to make this half diminished 7 a fully diminished 7th chord, it's the same triad, same diminished triad, but in order to make that minor 7th interval on top a diminished 7th, we have to flat it again, which means, yes, it becomes B double flat. The reason why we have to spell it as B double flat is because if we're counting the letters C as 1, D as 2, E as 3, etc., C to B is the interval of a 7th. However, if we respell that note as an A, C to A is technically a 6th. So in order for it to actually be a 7th, based on the theory that we are, building 7th chords, we have to enharmonically spell it as a 7th as opposed to spelling it as A. So we have C, E flat, G flat, B double flat. And another interesting little trick about fully diminished 7th chords is that every interval from C to E is a minor third. From E flat. E flat to G flat is a minor third. G flat to B double flat is a minor third. So it's nothing but minor thirds being stacked on top of each other. So here's the difference between the half diminished 7 and the fully diminished 7. Here's half diminished, fully diminished. You heard that top note flatted by a half step. So let's just recap all those different types of 7th chords. Here's a C major 7. Here's C dominant 7. Here's C augmented 7. Here's C minor 7. C half diminished 7, aka C minor 7 flat 5. C fully diminished. One more time without the narration. have our main types of 7 chords. Occasionally in jazz, you will also see a C minor major 7 chord, but I can't really think of any examples in 18th or 19th century classical music where I've ever seen that chord before. So that will happen periodically in jazz, but it's not common in Western classical music theory. So here we have 7th chord inversions. Similarly, we use figured bass to designate 7th chord inversions. So if we take our root position C major 7th chord, we've got a 7th, a 5th, and a 3rd. So if we take that C up an octave, in first inversion, we now have the intervals 6, 5, 3. But we often abbreviate that to just 6, 5. So first inversion of a 7th chord, and I should mention this is any type of 7th chord. I'm just using C major 7th as an example. But if I were to have B flat and make this a C dominant 7th chord, it would still be the same figures. Because as I said, the quality of the interval doesn't really matter for figured bass when we're talking about chord inversions. So, you know, if this were to be a diminished 5th, it would still be written 6/5, whether it's major 7th, minor 7th, dominant 7th. We use the same figured symbols, no matter which quality of 7th chord it is. So from here to here is a 6th, a 5th, a 3rd, 6/5/3, often abbreviated to 6/5. Now, if we take this E and bump it up an octave, now all of a sudden we've got the intervals 6, 4, 3, which is often abbreviated to just 4/3. Now, if we take that G up an octave, we're in 3rd inversion. And so triads only had 2 inversions because we only have 3 pitches. 7th chords, because they have 4 pitches, have 3 different inversions. And so now we've got a 6th, a 4th, and a 2nd. So seconds are considered dissonant intervals. So 3rd inversion, written as 4/2, they sound really cool because you've got that dissonance right at the bottom of the chord. So let me play the difference between all 4 types. So root position, first inversion, 2nd inversion, 3rd inversion. So just remember, root position, you could just call it 7. 2nd inversion, 6/5. 3rd inversion, 4/3. 3rd inversion, 4/2. So first inversion, 6/5. 2nd inversion, 4/3. 3rd inversion, 4/2. Now let's do a little bit of contextual analysis here using our words. So I've changed the key. We're in the key of G because of the F sharp and the key signature. So now, since we're in the key of G, and we're starting on the chord G, B, D, that's a G major chord in the key of G, so we call it our 1 chord. Now, here we have a C chord, C, E, G, and C is the 4th note in the key of G. So when we build a chord off of that 4th scale degree, we call it the 4 chord. And here we have a 7th chord built off of scale degree 5. Now, scale degree 5 is also called the dominant itself. So this 7th chord built on scale degree 5, naturally, diatonically, is a dominant 7th chord. So notice, D, F sharp, A, and then D to C is a minor 7th. So this is a dominant 7th chord right here. It's not a major 7th chord, it's a dominant 7th chord. And here, we're back to G, B, D. So let's just listen to that first. Now that's fine when we keep everything in root position. However, the more we start to discuss voice leading in the future, the more we start to use inversions of chords. And what I mean by voice leading is imagine each one of these notes of the chord is creating its own little melody line. And melodies are generally more tuneful when they have smaller intervals or conjunct intervals. When you have more larger looping intervals, those are considered disjunct intervals, and they're not as melodic and they're not as tuneful, generally speaking. So, if we listen to this second version of the chord progression, where I've put the 4 chord in second inversion, where we keep our G pitch in common instead of having it up here, it actually creates a much smoother transition in the chords. And then here, I've put this one in second inversion as well, so you'll notice it just creates overall much smoother voice leading from one chord to the next. So here it is in the inversions. Now here, I'm going to play the difference between if I keep everything in root position and we have those larger intervals between the notes. Now, play it again, the inversions. Much smoother, much cleaner voice leading. The other thing, too, is once we get into the rules of part writing, or guidelines of part writing, there are certain things we want to try to avoid. Like, for example, G to D is a fifth, C to G is a fifth. And when we have fifths moving in parallel, that's typically frowned upon. It's something we try to avoid when we're writing music, because again, it just sort of creates this really kind of blocky, hollow sound. So let's listen to the difference one last time. Here's everything in root position. Very large disjunct intervals between the top notes of the chords. And now, if we play it from here, much better voice leading by putting the chords in inversions. Just much smoother, much more tuneful sounding. So, that's it for this lesson. Hope you guys learned a lot.